To this video in how to evaluate students' writing, specifically for ESL and ESL students. Okay, so when you're faced with a text that you have to evaluate and give a grade to, a lot of people get stressed out and you think to yourself, okay, where do we start? What are we looking for? What is an A exactly? Is it just a random mark that we give? How do we know? Well, here's some tools that I'm hoping are going to help you. Before we get started, let's have a quick look back at a text that we corrected when we did the error correction and feedback. Okay, so here let's recall. The first thing that we did is go through the text and choose different errors to focus on, right? So we looked at the sundaes, chocolate chips, so some spelling errors, and some errors of communication. So right, and this is some of the feedback that we gave to the students specifically. Okay, we wanted to ask them about sundaes, about checking spelling, a collocation, and using French. Okay, now you'll see why this is important. The very first thing that we do is go through and give error correction and feedback to the students, because as teachers we are much more concerned with improving the students' writing, right, than giving a grade. All right. So there's our text from the student. So let's see, how do we grade this text? Well, the first thing we're going to ask ourselves is, what are we looking for? And luckily, the ministry has published criteria in the framework for evaluation of learning. So each one of the competencies, so competency 1, competency 2, and competency 3, have different evaluation criteria. So what we're looking for. And the two that we're really looking for, and you'll notice that this here is for cycle 2 and 3. So this is for an ESL student in grade 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, we're looking for application of targeted language conventions. So what does that mean? Well, that means we're looking for grammar that we've targeted. It means we're looking at punctuation that we've targeted. And we're looking for spelling of words that we've targeted. So not all grammar and spelling and punctuation errors, just the ones that we've really been working on. So that's what we're going to be evaluating. Okay, we're also looking for the characteristics of a written text. So that means, is the text on topic? Does it respect the required text form? So does it look like a letter, for example, if you're writing a letter, or does it look like I don't know, a short paragraph or a short story? Is it well structured? Is it taking the intended purpose and audience? So is this written for someone who's older than them, someone who's their age, someone who's younger? And is it creative? Now, it's a lot harder to evaluate that one, but we'll have a look and see how that can be done. Okay. So that sounds all well and good, but how do we figure out what's an A, what's a B, what's a C? Well, this is where the EESL de Compétence come in, the competency scales. So in addition to publishing the framework for evaluation of learning, this thing, the ministry also published a grading scale that tells us exactly what we're looking for and gives us descriptors. And this is super useful. And I want you to consider that the grade here really just gives information about how close the student is to the target, right? Think about it as a target. It's not about how much effort that they've put in, or whether you like them or not, or whether they're trying really hard. This is just information about how close they are to the topic. So where do they need to the target, sorry. So where do they need to be? Do they need to be at 5? Is that where we start and then take marks off? Well, no, actually. If you have a look at what they write in the EESL de Compétence, now this is all in French for any of you that are struggling with that. What we're actually looking for is here, compétence acceptable, acceptable competency. So the student is using all his resources or her resources, and they are, able to accomplish the essential task. This is 3. So 3 is actually our target. Anything above that is a 4, and anything above that is a 5. If they're a little bit below, then it's a 2 and a 1. Now, The Quebec government, of course, has decided to use scales 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but whenever you're evaluating something, there's always going to be a grading scheme, whether it's, this starts at 60% or 70% or 80%, or if it's A, B, C, D. Okay, so just keep in mind that whatever they're using as a scale here, it doesn't really matter. What does matter is starting off with what does on target look like. All right, so let's go back to our competency scale. So if this is our competency scale, this is what we're looking at, right? Acceptable competency development, anything above that is a 4 or 5, anything a little bit below on target is 2 or 1. So let's look more closely at what's acceptable. So in grade 5 and 6, an acceptable competency development, students are writing texts that are on topic, that are following the instructions, the texts are short, using complete sentences and simple language. They're starting to experiment with language. They're starting to check their grammar, spelling, and punctuation, and they're even correcting some of their language errors. Okay, so if I were to do a checklist, it would be something like this. The text is on topic, the text follows instructions, the text uses short, complete sentences, the student is experimenting with language, they're checking spelling, grammar, and they're correcting language errors. Okay, so again, just a reminder, if this is on target, so we've just said what's on target, you can also look to see if they're doing what's on target plus a little bit more, or on target plus also even more than that, and this will happen. So going back here again, we have our acceptable competency development, this one here. What does it look like if they're thorough? Well, they're using models as a springboard. They're personalizing text. They're checking grammar when needed. Or they're writing well-structured texts. The ideas are flow and are logical. Complex sentences structures. So this is where we're aiming for. This is where we start, hopefully, and this is where we end up, even more. Okay, so we're moving from the bottom up all the time. Some kids will come into your class able to do number 5 right away, which is fantastic. So you encourage them to do that, but then if you really want to, you can always use the competency scales for the next level and challenge them to get a 3 on, let's say, secondary 1. Competency scales. There's always room for improvement. So some kids will start in your class at 5. Some kids will start in your class at 1 and really only move up to 2, and that's also okay because you can show them that they have developed, even if they're not quite at the minimum requirement yet. That's totally legitimate. Okay, so let's go back here again and see if we have all 5 of those different levels here. We're not going to give this to the student. What we will do, if we're smart, and you all are, is we will use an assessment tool. Okay, so we take those descriptors and we put it into something like a rubric, and if you can make it to something that's really specific to the task that you're working on, it's even better. So here I've created an assessment tool based on the ice cream text that we looked at the start. Okay, so what's on target here? Yeah, so on target is on topic, remember, follows instructions, short, complete sentences, experiments with language, spelling, grammar, corrects some language error. So on target, again, is this. This is what I've written out. I wrote, our target language was grammar. So grammar was the simple present tense of to be, so I said on target would probably be 1 mistake. We've really focused on this. I'll allow 1 mistake, but they really should be doing this more or less well. Okay, so spelling, our targeted vocabulary words were words about ice cream, so there's 1 or 2 mistakes. And I've already told them that their text should be about 5 sentences long and should be understood by their friends. They should have short, simple sentences, but they should be pretty easy to understand. All right. And again, just a reminder that we can move backwards and forwards on this. So what does this look like for the ice cream text? Well, again, just a reminder, these are the mistakes that I spotted in the first draft and that we corrected and we gave feedback on for the student. So how would it look when you evaluate it? Well, I'm going to highlight it. To me, guess what? Not only are all the verbs here to be in perfect, They've also really conjugated all of them. I really love ice cream. Sundaes are good. My three favorite flavors, okay, we talked about are Papa. I don't like. Okay, maybe there's no punctuation here, but punctuation wasn't one of the things that we were looking at. I like my cone. Okay, so all of the verbs are correct. Good for them. They went above and beyond. So this is a 5 out of 5. Okay, spelling of the vocabulary words. Well, the vocabulary words we were working on were ones to do with ice cream and sundaes, so things like chocolate, vanilla, whipped cream, strawberry, probably syrup, those kind of things. So do we see any mistakes? Yeah, there's a couple of mistakes in the vocabulary word. So they're on target, but they probably could have done better, especially with something like chocolate, because we can see here that they spelled it correctly, and here they didn't. I was feeling a little generous, so I said 1 to 2 mistakes because I said this was probably a mistake and this was a mistake. I could have said this was a mistake too. I could have highlighted that one. Bubble gum. So it could have been a 2, arguably. But honestly, I'm a little bit of an easy corrector. And that's the thing with evaluation. Some people are a little harder and some people are a little easier. Boom. Okay. So I gave them a 3 out of 5 here. It would have been legit to give them a 2 out of 5. Okay, for content, this is our target. Is the text about ice cream? Yep. Is it 5 or more sentences long? Well, let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's 5 sentences long, although I really like this one. It's kind of complex. Sundaes are very good with, and then they've listed a few things. So that's experimenting with things that are a little bit more complex than your simple sentences. Can it be understood by your friends? Absolutely. Is it different from the model? I'm assuming this is different from the model because they've done things like Berra Papa, Smarties, and Boobligum. So they're listing some different things in here. So I think they've done pretty well on that. Content, 8 out of 10. So if we total this up, you're going to see that I divided formulation of the message into spelling and grammar, but they still total 10 marks, and content totals 10 marks, so it's out of 20. I would write something at the bottom of their little text like this. I would give them the evaluation grid highlighted like this. And I would say, you know, reading about ice cream sundaes in your text made me hungry. Just a little encouragement there. You use a lot of adjectives, right? This is our feedback. It helped me to imagine your ice cream. Fix your mistakes and hand it in again. As we mentioned in feedback and error correction, there is absolutely no point in giving them error corrections and feedback if they don't get a chance to do something with it. I like to give them a preliminary grade at the same time so they can see that, you know, this is what they would get if they didn't fix their mistakes, and that they can always improve their grade, which is a nice motivation, help them get to the target. Okay, so remember too that that was for grade 5-6 ESL. For ESL and Enriched, this is the competency scales. And believe it or not, the ministry has written up competency scales for every single level of the English program, for every single competency, so competency 1, 2, and 3. And so we have really great descriptors for whatever you're trying to evaluate that you can start with. So this is the evaluation scale for competency 3 for secondary cycle 1 and 2. So secondary 1 and 2, grade 7 and 8. Okay, so our acceptable is they are writing, acceptable competency development, right? Number 3, they're writing and producing texts that are on topic, understood upon first reading. This is EESL, so we need to understand it very clearly. They have a clear sense of purpose and direction, although this is kind of interesting. The focus can waver at times, so we're not expecting them to be expert writers in grades 7 and 8. They can deal with complex issues and abstract ideas. They can elaborate on their ideas and viewpoints. But this is also interesting. They don't have to be consistent in their voice to be on target at this stage. They should be using text components effectively, so they should be using, for example, setting or dialogue, or if they're writing a newspaper article or feature article, they should be able to use headlines and images. Okay? They are using familiar language conventions, so that language conventions, just remember, is grammar. So things that are familiar to them with grammar. And they are also working on using more accurate vocabulary. So they're working to improve. And this I've put in at the end just to show you. This is where we're aiming for. This was actually the evaluation rubric that the ministry put out in June 2012 for secondary 5 enriched. So you can see they've done something pretty similar. This is the formulation of the message. So they were asked to do a feature article. So did they use a headline, controlling idea, paragraphs, quotations, blah, blah, blah. Did they use accurate language? So errors. Okay, and have a look and see what's considered sort of on target and what's considered above target. And again, language register. So this is all about content and formulation of the message. And you can see if you were doing this exam that you could use this as a justification. Okay, so just to recap, what do we know about evaluation? We know, first of all, that evaluation does not help improve students' writing. Okay, this is what feedback and error correction does. Okay, if you want to really help students learn to improve their writing, you're not going to do it with grades. Grades are simply information about how close a student is to an on-target descriptor. Okay, so that's all it does, is it tells the student, according to the ministry, you are meant to do this when you are writing, and you are on target, or you are a little bit below. We can work on this, or you're a little bit above, or you can get even better by doing this. So the idea is this is where you're at according to the target, and this is how you can get even better. We do that through feedback. Okay. Finally, a little bit, just to finish off, we're going to do some tips. So when you're evaluating, make sure, number one, that you use descriptors, so competency scales, to help you determine what level the writing is at. The descriptors competency scales are there for a reason, to help people be really consistent. So start with those, use them. The next thing is to create evaluation tools like rubrics. Not only will this help you grade more accurately, it'll help you grade more fairly. Share your rubric with the students in advance. This is going to save you a lot of headaches and a lot of worry about having to negotiate with them about their grades and worrying about upsetting them. If they know exactly where the grade comes from and that you're not just making this up, a magic number out of a hat, it'll seem a lot more fair. In fact, it will be a lot more fair. And finally, give the students a chance to self-evaluate. One of the best tricks I learned when I'd been teaching for a few years is to not only give the kids the evaluation grid, but also ask them to evaluate themselves before they handed something in. They were usually a lot harder on themselves than I would have been. And it also gave them a chance to sort of go, oh crap, I forgot to do this. So they would take it back and, fix it. And finally, yes, of course, if you really want to help them improve their writing, motivate them a little bit by letting them improve their grade. The first time round is the hardest on you to give feedback and evaluation. And if you do a really good job and give them a chance to improve, the second time around it's much quicker. You just increase their grade. And that's it. Thanks for watching.